So I will start from the very beginning. I was inspired to become a school psychologist because I worked as a teacher's assistant, and at first I wanted to become a kindergarten teacher. I that was one of my things. I was like, oh, I like kindergarten. I think I can do this. And then it kind of transformed into high school. But when I worked at a school in Brooklyn as a teacher's aide, and I saw how mental health was plaguing those students and how it was really impacting their academics, I said to myself, well, I want to become a school psychologist because our kids really need us. And there's a need for mental health awareness in schools that some kids aren't necessarily getting. So I started off in the city, and then I became a school psychologist. I worked in Brooklyn, and I worked in East New York, Flatbush. I worked in so many different areas, but I think things came to a head when I worked in Long Island. And that's when I was particularly blindsided because I came to Long Island, and I remember my first day at this elementary school. I was like, oh, like, this is where I'm going to be. I'm finally settled, because everybody that I worked with in Brooklyn was like, oh, like Long Island is like this place to be. Like, you should definitely be there. And I said to myself, yeah, like I want stability, and I want a job with benefits. I want a job where I can retire and work for a few years. But then I walked in the building and I noticed that I was the only school psychologist of color and the only Black psychologist, and I was really like, okay, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe this is something that I'm going to be able to do. And but then it really got to me. And I'm going to be vulnerable in this moment. Like, it was very tough for me the first year. I wasn't really sure how to navigate. I wasn't really myself. I felt like at times I may have made myself feel small. I will always honor my feelings, but it's very hard to talk about. I feel like in order to not appear as an angry Black woman or as a passionate Black woman, my second year, I kind of wore a mask. Like, before the pandemic, and this is something that a lot of Black women in particular can relate to, is we code switch. And I don't even realize that I'm doing it. It's just, I walk into a building and I'm just like, this isn't who I really am. This is a version of me that I think you'll need. And I think it comes out of survival mode for us because our parents taught us how to do it. My mom, she's a Haitian immigrant, and I would always see her on the phone talking to people who weren't Caribbean, and she would just put on this amazing American accent. And I was like, you do not talk like that. I observed her do it, and in my mind thinking, okay, so I must do the same. So that was already something I found myself doing that I was uncomfortable with, but I did it because I wasn't sure how to navigate those things. And this isn't something that we're taught in grad school. We're not taught how to really deal with bureaucracy. We're not taught how to take care of ourselves, really. We're not taught how to navigate anything or navigate any of these difficult waters as potentially the only person of color working on a team. So the first 2 years were extremely difficult, and I felt like I was drowning, but I stayed because there were some really good people, and I had really great teachers that I was working with, but it was always uncomfortable. It was always me walking into a situation and going, how will they perceive me? How will they be comfortable with what I'm doing? And that is exhausting. That is emotionally exhausting, to have to come into work every single day, put on a mask, kind of mask who you are as a person or make yourself small, and then having to work in an already difficult job in an already difficult environment. So then after a while, I was kind of able to navigate and understand how things worked and kind of build myself up, but I still felt uncomfortable. I still didn't feel like myself. So getting to the real reason why I left was because on top of everything I've had to deal with, on top of my microaggressions, on top of prejudice, on top of being the only person of color there for a while, and on top of wearing a mask and code switching, I was given the message that, hey, you're taking too many sick days. You need to scale back on that. And I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, on top, this is during a pandemic. And that's really wildly insensitive, and it makes me feel wildly uncomfortable. And nobody should ever have to experience that, because for one, this job takes a toll on your mental health. So to tell someone and feel comfortable telling someone, hey, you shouldn't take a sick day. You need to just come into work and just suck it up. I was like, this is it. I am a trauma psychologist, and I am all about self-care. And I am all about taking care of the person next to me and making sure that they take care of themselves. I cannot preach to my kids and to my families that they need to take care of themselves, and then you tell me I cannot. And I always say it starts at the top. And if the top is telling you to neglect yourself, I was like, I'm walking away. So that was one of the real reasons that I had to walk away. But the most hurtful part of it all, and I think that this is what I want people to really understand, is that telling a Black educator that they need to stay in a harmful environment so that Black kids can look up to them is extremely harmful. And I'll explain why. I feel that and that was one of the reasons why I stayed, because people were just like, oh, well, you're the only Black psychologist, they need to see you. And that really did make me feel good, right? There was a lot of Black, because my school, there's a majority of Black and brown kids. And I was like, oh, I have to be there, I have to set the example. They relate to me, they can see me, but it's harmful. It's harmful to tell me to stay without telling the agency to change the conditions that make it uncomfortable for me. So for me, for those kids, what they're really watching is me suffer. They're watching me be unhappy, and they're thinking, again, that that's the norm. So I'm passing down a message like, you should just go to work and be oppressed and be uncomfortable and be unhappy and deal with all this, and that'll be okay. And then I used to wonder why kids, when I asked them what they want to be when they grow up, why they always said YouTubers or celebrities. It's because those people are following their dreams. They're happy. They don't look tired. They don't look like people who have to beg to take sick days. They don't look like people who have to beg for their mental health or their physical health. Kids want to see people who they can look up to, but also who can provide an example of what it means to take care of yourself and to be yourself. And I felt like I wasn't being that person for those kids. I felt like I was coming to work as a shell, and I was coming to work as a mask. And it took me a while to realize that I'm teaching my kids to do the same. And no student should ever feel like they have to look at a Black educator who's tired, who's worn down, who's burnt out, and say, I want to be like Dr.T when I grow up. I want to work like her. I want to work myself to death like her, and maybe get a seat at the table. And one day I meditated and I spoke to my ancestors, and I was like, in 1804, they said, nah, this ain't it. And I was just like, this ain't it. This is not okay. I am not okay. I cannot continue to come to work and communicate to my students of color that this is okay, that being treated this way is okay. And that's why I say to people to stop telling Black educators, hey, like, stay for the kids. They need to look at you, because then that Black educator is no longer a person. They're a number, they're a token, they're a poor example of what it looks like to be happy. If a Black educator is being treated well, then of course, I think that makes sense for them to stay. I think that makes sense for kids to see a good example. If a Black educator is a principal and they're happy and they're making change and they don't have one hand tied behind their back, that's wonderful. But for a Black educator like myself, who is coming to work tired, who's coming to work uncomfortable, who was crying in her office, who wasn't taking lunch breaks, that's not an example for our kids. That's not an example that they should aspire to. So I feel like we need to start a movement where we're not telling Black educators to stay, but we're telling the agencies, the schools, the clinics that they need to do better. Because if you're telling a Black educator that they should just stay in those poor conditions, then the conditions that continue to press us and our students is going to continue to occur and no change will happen. It's like it's a parallel to what's going on with the police. We're saying, police, you need to change. Like you're this police officer needs to change. But the whole system is rotten. So going down from the police commissioner, it starts way above us. And for us in a school, it's a superintendent. So if the superintendent is not with it, is not treating us correctly, then it will all trickle down. And that's where we need to change. That's where we need to start. So tell the superintendents, tell the police commissioners, hold them all accountable so that we can have better teachers, we can have better school psychologists, we can have better counselors, and we can have better police officers. We can just have a better community when we start holding people at the top accountable and not the people and saying, you need to do better. You need to just stay and just stay there because kids will just see you be unhappy. And just like how I saw my mom code switch and sacrifice her mental health and it got passed down to me, I will not pass that down to my students and I will not pass that down to my kids. And I personally feel like I will do much better if my students see me liberated as a business owner who makes my own decisions on my own terms. That's who you really need to see. You really need to see Dr. T calling the shots, Dr. T modeling self-care, Dr. T happy, instead of Dr. T coming to work like she doesn't want to be here. That is no example for our kids and for our future. And I wrote something down that I think that will be really helpful. Just reiterating because it's National Poetry Day. It's not poetry, but it's close to it. Students don't need a savior. They need an example. I'm just emulating what I've seen for years. What am I really teaching these kids? Fake it till you make it. Work twice as hard with your hand tied behind your back. Pretend to be someone you're not. Deny your authentic self. What am I really teaching them? Operate in survival mode. You can be like me. They'll let you sit at the table, but it comes with conditions. Now, my ancestors literally broke the negotiating table and made their own republic. My students can see me free and liberated. Most importantly, they can see me young, gifted, Black, and free. I love my students. They've really helped me grow as a clinician, as a person. They've meant so much to me over the years. Me leaving wasn't negative. It was more so positive. And I will never forget those memories. And I just want to communicate to them. I know they're probably not watching because I don't want them following my Instagram. But I will always have their back. But I'm a much better advocate and I'm a much better fighter when you can see me without my mask off and when you can see me making my own damn table. So I got through all that without crying, but I'm probably gonna cry after this because I've been crying all day. But I'm a therapist, so honor your emotions and honor your feelings. I'm going to summarize everything I put in this live, but I just want to tell everybody that if you're contemplating, if you're putting I'm not saying to quit. I'm just saying, like, if it comes to between your mental health, your peace, your sanity, and a paycheck, choose your sanity first. Your peace is priceless. Even if it means taking FMLA, if it means taking a break, if it means just leaving the situation or leaving a person for some time, do it.